Here's a quote from Jelly Roll Morton. Jazz music is to be played sweet, soft, and with plenty of rhythm. So here's my question. Did he play it sweetly? You'll find out.
This week's episode is Jelly Roll Morton, Birth of the Hot, the classic Chicago Red Hot Peppers sessions. These were recorded in 1926 and 1927. So without further ado, let's kick off the episode.
Hey, Drew, how's it going?
Man, good. Good. It's good to see you tonight.
Yeah, you too, buddy. You too. Let's do this. Hey, we're going to try something new this week. We're going to do a week in music under 2 minutes. So I'll get 2 minutes. You get 2 minutes. You want to go first or you want me to go first?
I'll go first.
All right, cool.
I feel like the tree imp in Lord of the Rings. If it's worth saying, it's worth taking your time. My week's been pretty plain Jane. We missed jazz on Sunday night due to Labor Day, so we're recording on the Tuesday after. I'll flip it over to you.
Okay, well, that was quick. Okay. Well, on Friday night of this weekend, I actually got to go see Lady D play. Her band Gunslinger was playing in a bar in Wolcottville, and I'll tell you what, when we showed up, the parking lot was packed. The bar was very, very small, and I was very, very hungry. And I was thinking to myself, it's going to take forever to order food and get food, but the pizza that I had was amazing. So Backwoods Tavern, thank you so much. The band was amazing that night. They were dodging raindrops and going to call it a couple of times, but they ended up not calling it and playing their entire set. Had a great time. The band sounded amazing. Of course, Monday was Labor Day, and it's Tuesday night now. So I actually didn't have any jazz music in my ears yesterday. We were spending time with the family. I know. So that's my week in music. And that's both of us under 2 minutes.
Oh, I'm sure I had a lot to say, but we'll keep it under wraps. It's been a good week in music around here.
Yeah.
Especially because of this album. It may not rank very high at the end, and I would use the term we bixed this album too. If you guys remember back when we did Big Spiderbeck, we didn't understand something. And this week, I think now we're back a year later, reviewing this album and starting to ask those questions. What did we miss? And the historical impact of this. I mean, come on, dude, 1925 and 1926. Here we are almost 100 years later, reviewing an album by the pianist, and some might call the originator of jazz music. At least he would call himself that. So
highly disputed, people would say, but he would call himself that.
Oh, yes. And wrote a scathing letter to a jazz magazine many years ago, or a newspaper. It said, "Hey, I am where it started." So it was an interesting week to go back and review this.
Yeah.
Do you want to get into the facts of the slides and then we can discuss the album? Or
Absolutely. Yeah, let's knock it out. Knock it out.
Before you begin that slideshow, I just want to give everybody a quick heads up, and I'm going to put this slide up right now. This album, this early jazz recording group led by Jelly Roll Morton in Chicago in 1926, formed to make recordings specifically for Victor, consisting at any one time of 7 or 8 of the best freelance players available. So he was pulling from the best of the best at that time to record this album in 1926 and 27. And so I think as we get into that conversation, all of that helps me in mind of what is really coming. So
well, and if I could point out a fact just from the article in the magazine too that I highlighted, it's apparent on this album the vivid clarity compared to the old acoustic recording. So
I'm going to get into some of that.
I know you will. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. So
yeah.
All right, let's bring up the slideshow.
Let's do it.
First slide, whatever you do it to jazz. And except for yesterday, I have lived by that pretty much all week. Again, the Jelly Roll Morton Birth of the Hot is what we're going to talk about. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. We'll just touch on the artwork just a little bit. I just thought it was interesting. Again, I'm a fan of the CD art, so I like the picture where he's got his finger up. Hang on a minute, hang on. And then the guys are kind of standing around him. One of them's chuckling, and one of them's looking like, "What you talking about, man? What you talking about? We're going to do this." So I just like the artwork. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. A couple of pictures of Jelly Roll there. And then, the one on the top is the quintessential picture that you see most of the time with Jelly Roll anyways, him sitting at the piano, turned to his right, kind of giving a stare to the camera. The one on the bottom, I just found interesting. It doesn't really even resemble him from what I picture in my mind he would look like, but I like the one on the bottom as well. The caricature that I found, I love looking through people's art and stuff, and this is just a sketch, a caricature of Jelly Roll. It represents him pretty well, I think.
It does.
So, and you and I were talking about how they would get dressed up to go play. We're talking about that this morning on our personal journey. So, the tie's undone and the collar's open. He's probably done with his set and relaxing. So, all right, let's move on to the next slide, and we'll talk about jazz lingo for the day. So, the word that I chose today is ragtime. Ragtime is the rhythm characterized by strong syncopation in the melody with a regularly accented accompaniment in stride piano style. Now, if you remember 2 weeks ago when we talked about Art Tatum, Art was a stride piano player, the oompa, oompa, oompa on the left hand, and then you could do, arpeggios or chords or whatever you want to do on the right hand. Ragtime, Art wasn't a ragtime player, but Jelly Roll is. So that's why I chose ragtime as my lingo for the day today.
Brilliant word of the day for this.
Yeah, right. Next slide. Hey, cats, this is where to find it. So this week's album can be found on YouTube. I found it on iTunes. Drew, you found it on YouTube Music, and it is available on CD. It does not say anything about an LP release. All right, let's go to the information slide. I'll talk just a little bit about Jelly Roll. Jelly Roll was born in 1890 and passed away in 1941. Some of the influences that I found, actually, it talks more about him being the pioneer of ragtime, and I highlighted the word pioneer. I'm just thinking of the settlers, coming across America, the pioneers coming across America, blazing the way for the others to follow behind, and that's kind of what I think of when I think of Jelly Roll Morton. He did have an influence. You found a guy by the name of Tony Jackson, and I made that. Yeah.
And before we go to Tony Jackson on my end, I added this too because we started the episode with it, and he would say that he was the pioneer of jazz also. He was where it all began. According to Jelly Roll, he was it. And there's some history that may or may not back that up, but he was pretty full of himself anyways. So, but
Jelly
I just
Roll?
added that.
Are you talking about Jelly Roll or Tony?
Roll. Jelly Roll was.
Yeah.
And then, yes, the note says that I found Tony Jackson. I was actually looking through some historical information from Jelly Roll and from the album itself. Tony Jackson was another stride and Dixie pianist, not much older than Jelly Roll himself. And forgive me, I don't have his paperwork directly in front of me, but he was one of the cats that first inspired Jelly Roll to start playing.
Okay.
There's some historical information that Jelly Roll actually made a harpsichord when he was about 10 out of some junkyard material. And he really wanted to play a piano. However, his family, as a religious organization, would not permit him to play because of where he would wind up playing. So he had to play that harpsichord by himself.
Which he did anyways.
Which he did anyways.
Wound up where they didn't want him.
Exactly. And so coming across some of those more, I was really trying to dig into who Jelly Roll was, because I know what we scored him. I know where we landed. I know what happened. But what did I miss? What did I forget? Tony was one of the guys that also was part of the early 1900s, like 1908, 1910, part of the vaudeville shows. 1904. Tony Jackson was in American South in the minstrel shows in 1904 and vaudeville prior to that. So Tony Jackson then encouraged Jelly Roll, Ferdinand. I'm sorry, I wrote that down somewhere too. His real name, birth name, Ferdinand Lamont. He encouraged Ferdinand Lamont to go ahead and get active. So there's a lot of history of that. We'll get back to that slide.
Ferdinand Joseph Lamoth.
Lamont. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
But Tony Jackson influence.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thanks for correcting me. Discography, he does have 44 CDs, which would be it'd be a lot of sides that he recorded. But yeah, the discography is based on today's numbers, not 1927 numbers. So, genre that I have listed is ragtime jazz, ragtime and jazz for his genres. Now, again, he's the pioneer, so he pretty much could fit ragtime or Dixieland style. Some things he was known for. Of course, he was Creole. He was not African American. He was American descent with
Spanish and French.
Yep, there you go. Thank you for reminding me of that. He learned piano as a child, and like you said, he built his own harpsichord so that he could probably teach himself, because Mama said, no, you can't. And he said, okay, well, I'm going to anyways, and he built his harpsichord. And then, like you said, he ended up playing in brothels at about the age of 14. So he didn't listen to his mama, and he ended up playing some not so great places. Some of his most famous work, the Black Bottom Stomp, which is actually song number 1 on the 2627 album that we're talking about, King Porter Stomp, Shoeshiner's Drag, and Dead Man's Blues. Do you think now would be a good time to play a clip, or do you want to wait for finish the slide?
No, I think now would be a great time to play a clip. Originally, in my mind, I wanted to play just that opening song, which would have been that right there.
Black Bottom Stomp.
Black Bottom Stomp. So let's go ahead and roll that clip.
All right. What'd you think of Black Bottom Stomp?
I'm historically really an awesome song. It's what starts it all off. That is one of his tunes.
Yeah,
for sure.
For sure. And that's one of the most famous ones. That's why I added it on the slideshow anyways.
Yeah.
And again, I like the recording aspect of it. It sounds a lot clearer, unfortunately, than most of the Jeanette stuff does. So
yes, it does,
because it's acoustic. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the 6 degrees on the slideshow. And I know you found a different one because you and I discussed it on Saturday, but I found Jelly Roll played with Zutty Singleton. Now, Zutty was a drummer who also went on to play with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. So Zutty Singleton, the drummer, played with Dizzy, and then right 2 miles from Dizzy. So I've got 2 degrees of separation.
I didn't get it down to 2. And I didn't even see Zutty. I didn't. My apologies. I don't look at drummers very often. And maybe Delaney Lady D would spit me straight. And then drummers are important. And obviously, listen to this week's album, you start to think maybe drummers are. But mine was like 6 degrees. I went all the way around the rabbit hole to find it. But Jelly Roll on this album played with Glenn Scoville. Glenn played with the piano player by the name of Joe Sullivan, who had recorded with Coleman Hawkins, and Hawkins had recorded with Miles. So it was a long way around, but Joe Sullivan the album was Rare, Hot, and Fine with Coleman Hawkins.
Okay.
And going back quite some decades again. So
yeah. Yeah, for sure. When I first started looking for the 6 degrees info, man, I was kind of overwhelmed, and I had to go and really search and start looking at names and who Jelly Roll played with. So it was a little overwhelming for me
Yep.
this week, thinking, man, 1926 and Miles, he's way older than that. Well, I mean, he's not even born yet in 26, but and
Yep.
then I'm thinking, man, how am I going to find one? But yeah, that's cool. I'm glad you
Yeah.
found one as well. Did you have any? You had some other information that
I
you wanted to put
do.
out
I
on
wanted to
this
talk
slide.
about something that I noticed on the slide you missed: honors and awards. This was this is going back some time because it wasn't readily available until you started digging in. So 2006, the Music Box interviews are released posthumously as a box set, and it won 2 Grammy Awards. During that same year, Morton was honored with a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Then Jelly Roll Morton was posthumously nominated in 1992 for Tony Awards for Best Original Score for the musical depicting his life, Jelly's Last Jam. Morton then was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998, and then later elected as a charter member of the Jeanette Records Walk of Fame. And if you remember that, we've got some pictures of that I'll put up on screen, but what a day that was to be at Jeanette. And then the last one here in 2008, he was inducted into the Louisiana Music Hall of Fame in 2008. So what a set of awards for Cat from 1926.
Yeah.
And just to know all of that. For all of y'all that want to get into a little bit more of Jelly Roll Morton and what I would consider the beginning of jazz, whether he was the father of it or not, historically, these albums, and what he's done have been phenomenal to go back and listen to.
So you were talking about posthumously, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think now would be a good time to play Dead Man's Blues.
I,
Dead Man Blues.
I
Yeah.
agree. All
Yeah.
right, let's roll
All
that
right. Here.
clip.
What's that I hear at 12 o'clock in the daytime? Church bell ringing.
Man, you don't hear no church bell ringing 12 o'clock in the day.
Yes, indeed. Somebody must be dead.
Ain't nobody dead. Somebody must be dead drunk.
No, I think it's a funeral.
Hey, look here. I believe it is a funeral. I believe I hear that trombone phone.
So I just found it. I found it interesting. That it's probably not the first vocal recording or even that kind of style, but I found it interesting that he would throw that in on the Red Hot Peppers album. Anyways, so I just love the way that it starts. What's that sound? That's the church bells. So
And I didn't think about this at the time. What did he grow up hearing?
yeah,
Church bells ringing, funeral marches, and processions through New Orleans streets.
Yep.
And it makes perfect sense then. It's the sight and sounds of the time.
sight and sound. And I got to ask you, do you think that he might have gotten a chance to hear Buddy Bolden play? I mean,
Man,
Bolden didn't pass away until 1908, right?
Yep.
So
I'd be hard pressed to think that because not many people ever did. And I see the picture of Bolden and the people playing in his band. There was a strong chance, especially because of New Orleans, that some of those members would have played with Jelly Roll or around town with Jelly Roll. So there's a chance that maybe he did. But there's nothing that I came across in
no
my research
documentation.
that said
Right.
he did. But
Right.
chances are, with a song like I Thought I Heard Buddy Bolden Say, that he may not have known of him because of his upbringing at the time. Well, no, let me say, he may not have played with him. He knew of him, though.
He knew of him, right?
And
Okay.
imagine sitting on your front porch down near Storyville or the red light district, and you could hear Buddy Bolden's horn at night.
Oh yeah.
Or maybe Jelly Roll was too busy in his own brothels making music to pay attention to Buddy Bolden. Or maybe that's who Buddy started playing with. You never know. I thought I heard Jelly Roll Morton play, so I played
That's
my horn
right.
on a rooftop. And
You
that
want
leads-
you,
that
want
le-
to throw in another clip?
I do,
or
man.
Okay.
That was Dead Man Blues. And the one
Yep.
thing that I'm always excited about is the Wolverines out of Jeanette.
Okay.
And one of the songs that was recorded was Wolverine Blues. That was on this album. And I think it's crucial historically to hear that. Do you have that loaded up?
I do. You ready?
Yeah. Very
The stride piano. He's playing stride. Boom, boom, boom. Boom.
I listened to a guy the other day explain what Jelly Roll was known for. And in that stride time, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And what Jelly started to do with his left thumb on the piano, it's typically bass, on the and of 1, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, he would start to play the melody of the song with his right hand so that he could freestyle over top of it. And then with the bass part of his left hand, he could play the bass part. So in a sense, Jelly Roll brought 4/4 to jazz music.
Okay. Interesting.
So I geeked out, brother. I geeked out.
I know you did. I know.
Let's go back to some of the more awards that he had won here, and let's finish off this slideshow. Shall
Perfect. Yep. Let's do
we? Perfect. Also in 1938, I didn't include this on the slide, but he recorded 100 individual compositions for the Library of Congress. And if you go back to some of the interviews that he won awards for in the 2006 box set, dig into that information for yourselves and begin to listen to that. The Library of Congress stuff, he had 52 records, 100 individual compositions, and it was him playing. And that's it. He didn't have a group for it, but that was for the Library of Congress for a historical marker of what this music is. So
Yeah.
he may not have been the father of it, but boy, he was up there.
He sure was. Now, there's no denying the fact that he was the first one to write it down and annotate it.
Yep.
And so that is a fact. He may not have started jazz, but he was the first one to start transcribing it onto sheet music.
Yes, and that was actually Jelly Roll Blues in 1916.
Mhm.
The first great jazz composer whose Jelly Roll Blues became the first jazz composition to be published. So as far as publishing stuff, we use the Real Book a lot for jazz heads and standards, and imagine being the first to do that. And then he was also the first notated jazz arranger.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I mean, you're writing stuff like just for this album. I said that at the beginning. He picked the best of the best improvisers at the time to do this album, and he would have had some natural arrangements for him. Here's what we're going for during the. So I mean, I gotta say, he may not have been the father of jazz, but if you're the first jazz arranger, I gotta give him some props.
Some
Now,
props. Yeah. some
And
credit.
let's go on to some more history here, 'cause I can talk about Jelly all night, baby.
Well, we're going to here in just a minute. So, yeah, let's go to the last slide in the slideshow. Today in jazz history, September the 11th. So, my man Harry Connick Jr. was born in New Orleans in 1967. I'm a huge Harry Connick fan. Happy birthday, Harry Connick Jr. From a big fan. I actually saw you perform in Fort Wayne several years ago. I don't think you've been back since. Otherwise, I would have gone to see you. So, happy birthday, Harry Connick Jr. Flugelhornist Stacy Rolls was born in Los Angeles in 1955. And again, that's just I haven't heard any music by Stacy Rolls, but she's on my list, so I think I'm going to probably pull it up this week and see what the Flugelhornist sounds like. And then just one last thing on the slide is the quote that I read at the beginning of the episode. Jazz music is to be played sweet, soft, and with plenty of rhythm. So now I'll pose the question to you and let you answer it. Do you think he played sweetly and softly?
You know, man, I got to be honest. That's a great question. I'm looking at that sweet and soft with plenty of rhythm. Oh, brother played with plenty of rhythm.
Oh, yes, he did.
He would be what I would consider pretty sweet as a player. You know, we talk a lot about Herbie Hancock and his ability just to blend. And if in doubt, it's probably Herbie sitting back there just waiting for his chance to fill in, but not to show off. There was a lot of conversation about Jelly Roll online and on forums where he did the same thing. I brought the band together to do the thing that the band does. I don't need to play over them. But I think that in his years of playing in the brothels and in all the different places, he had to have been heard.
Yeah.
And was it sweet? Oh, yeah, I'm sure it was.
Yes.
I'm sure it was. So I want to touch on this before we get into Jelly Roll. 1926 and 1927. There were some real big things. I'm going to just read the slide quick. 26, Louis Armstrong hit and pioneered scat singing on his first record. The original composition, Heebie Jeebies, featured the Hot Five. Fletcher Henderson Group records with saxophonist Coleman Hawkins. The big thing to me, the first television is introduced, Monet dies, and because we have grown up watching them, the Harlem Globetrotters basketball team is organized. Now in 27, Louis Armstrong makes his first recording with the Hot Seven, and that the two additional members were drums and tuba. Jean Golquette's orchestra is dissolved. That's big to us because we've talked about Bix a lot and how he moved from place to place. That leads me to the cornetist. Bix Beiderbecke joins Paul Whitman's band. Why? Because he was part of Jean Golquette's orchestra. And then pianist and band leader Duke Ellington begins his residency at the Cotton Club in Harlem, increasing his band from 6 to 11 members. So historically, you're talking about 1927, Duke Ellington is already out there. So I wanted to include that 26 and 27 because I think that there's a lot of other things that happens that aren't music related, and this impacts me because of the history of what this album really is. So there's no doubt that there's no doubt. But going back to your question and that rabbit hole, did he play sweet and soft? What'd you think?
I do. I think there are sections where he says enough but doesn't overstate, and then I think there's sections where he does kind of take control of the conversation a little bit, and kind of guides the group. These recordings are a little more interesting to me because they seem to be a complete sentence. You know, when we talked about Bix, we talked about the 2 minutes that they had to record, and they never knew when they were going to have to finish up. And all of a sudden and they would have to stop maybe in the middle of a complete sentence. So maybe that's why I like Jelly Roll just a little bit more, because especially on these recordings, because he gets to finish his sentence and complete a song without cutting it off.
Yes. A lot of that came back to what it started with is we've got the best of the best, and they played together beforehand. It never really clarified if their group was paid beforehand to rehearse these songs or not, but it never said that it wasn't. There's enough hinting about this that he had time with these cats to play beforehand to get it just right. So when they walked in, there was no rush. The other huge part that I have to put out here, in 1925 and 26, when they recorded this, Victor Church Studio. This was at, some call it Trinity Church, some Victor Church, the Victor Church, and it was in the city of Camden. The Trinity Church was Trinity Baptist Church, which got bought by Victor because of their other productions next door. So they bought the old church. Now later they pulled the church steeple down in reverence for the church folk. But Trinity Church, or Victor Church Studio, is where they recorded. They did these in 1926 and 1927, but in 1925, they brought in microphones for the first time. We've talked about Jeanette and how important it was that they blew into that certain horn. You had to get Louis Armstrong far enough back so that he didn't vibrate the record while they were playing. And even when he recorded with King Oliver, Oliver was closer to the horn. But the drums and the piano and in a tight packed studio room, you had these musicians trying to line up in front of a horn. In 25, when Western Electric recording system came out, they began to use microphones. So once they got in, they could get that system set up right. Now, it was still going back behind the wall. You still had to have the recording behind it. But even then, the reason for the Western Electric recording system is that they were using a 13-foot weight to spin the plate for the recording. That was why the church was ideal 2 stories up. And you can see in one of the pictures, I'm going to put it up here in just a bit, of the band. If you look close enough behind where Jelly Roll's standing, you can see where those ropes were attached behind the piano. And it's an iconic church, Victor Church studio recording. So the recording technology just a year before went to microphones. And so the sound is definitely better than a Bix, who would have recorded the year before. Now, Jeanette was a homemade studio, if I can get away with saying that, as much love as I have for them.
Yes,
Star
absolutely.
Piano and Jeanette. But this was the big step. This was going to the big boys in Camden. and again, going back to grabbing the local talent to record it. There's a lot of names on it that I don't know. But
yeah, same. So you dropped the fact earlier on me, and I wanted to highlight it, and I want you to tell me about it again. But this album was recorded in Studio 2 at Victor.
yes, it was.
So who recorded in Studio 1?
Well, so, and I have to change who it was because I thought it was Art. It was not. I just looked down at my notes, so my bad. But you'll appreciate the name coming next. In the fact that it was Trinity Church, studio number 1 was the old sanctuary, and it had an original organ in it. And there were serial numbers. I mean, the whole deal about it. But the first recorded jazz on an organ was at the Trinity Church Studio number 1, or the Victor owned number 1 studio. 1926, jazz recording on an organ was done by Fats Waller.
Okay.
It was an influence in Art Tatum.
In
and
Art
I thought
Tatum,
it was Art
yep.
earlier, and then when I flipped to this evening, I was like, oh, yep, that's not good. But
Okay.
it's Fats Waller. And we've talked about Larry. I don't know if
We haven't yet.
we will get to Larry Young, and we're going to get to Jimmy Smith, like it or not, the organ players. But the history of this, 1926, somebody already recorded jazz music by then, by the time the 50s rolls around. So the organ is not new to jazz music. The
Right.
tuba is a long-standing instrument in jazz music. I started to geek out with all of the history of not just of Jelly Roll and his carrying 2 pearl-handled 6-shooters, wearing a diamond in his teeth, being a pimp. It's exciting to hear what his life brought. But he was working as a night security officer at a barrel factory, is what he told Grandmama, because he'd already been kicked out of his house. Well, parents had passed away, and sister got married, another sister got married. And so he was living with his grandmother from... maybe it wasn't even real biological grandmother, but she saw him walking home one night in his 3-piece suit or one morning and realized what he was up to. He wasn't working security at a barrel factory, so she kicked him out at 14, which is why he hit the road. And you love to say how he carried his money. So
He carried it in a big trunk, like a pirate trunk. He carried it, and you know what? That's the funny part. They made it sound like he flaunted his money, which I probably believe he would.
oh yeah.
But he carried it around in a trunk. So it's just I found it interesting. I did. I found it completely interesting. So let me ask you this: how did the album make you feel when you listened to it?
You know, it's interesting because I geeked out on the history of things.
Mm-hmm.
And originally through the album, just like we said it, or I said it earlier, I Bixed this one. I did not understand what Bix Beiderbecke meant in jazz history until after the fact. Now, going back to listen to Jelly Roll Morton, I really understood better what I was listening to. My first listen to it through a year ago.
Shoot. That's okay. Take your time. Let me interject something while you look. Dad asked me yesterday if we would have recorded this episode about Jelly Roll a year ago when we first talked about him, it might have been a little different because
Yes.
you and I bixed it because we are unconnoisseurs, because we're still on our journey, learning the history and learning about jazz music. I said, yeah, I think it would totally be different a year ago. This recording, if we had just listened to the album this week, we'd have both been, it's okay. Probably not going to go back to it.
Yep.
But I'll tell you what, having it back in my ears this week gave me a greater appreciation for it. Of course, we don't change our scores, and what we give it, we give it. But my score would be different this time around if I was going to score it again.
Yep.
Because of the fact, again, the recording sounds better. The timing is way better, and it almost they can complete a song. They can complete a sentence, the thought in a whole song from beginning to end.
It ended. It wasn't rushed with the clink.
Right.
I agree with that. It was a great album then, but to not understand the history of it, to listen to it too early on, I underestimated the importance of it and the value of what I was listening to. I would rate it very different.
Yes.
And from the historical standpoint, originally the recording, I mean, let's face it, Bix's album sucked because we couldn't get through the scratches on the record. Now,
right.
That was part of how it was recorded at Jeanette. Even this being on mics, it sucks compared to today's technology.
But compared to Bix's, it is way better. Yes.
Night and day. So yeah, it's a very different one.
Now, here's the other thing. I'm not a huge fan of ragtime. I'm not a huge fan of Dixieland and ragtime. So that my score is going to come out here in just a minute. And again, it's personal preference. I don't mean to slam Jelly Roll, but it's not my jam. It's not something that I'm going to turn on because of. No. I feel good when I listen to it. It makes me. I mean, it doesn't hurt my feelings to listen to it. but I was playing it in the van yesterday for the family, and I was asking him, so when I play this music, what's the first thing that you think of? Dad said he thought of Looney Tunes. Yep. Mom, she thought of Little Rascals and Our Gang. Emily said Prohibition. It reminds me of Prohibition. And I'm like, man, those are really, really good answers. I think Kendra said that she thinks of the Flapper Girls doing the, with the shimmery dress and they're dancing. So again, silent movies for me is what I think of when I listen to Jelly Roll. But again, it doesn't hurt my feelings to listen to it. So I didn't make many notes the week that we listened to it. I'm just looking up at my notes here, and
it's funny because I've got 4 pages of things, mostly not really of the album.
Okay.
Associated with it, but
right.
So what hit me this week listening to it again differently with the fresh ears? I mean, coming off of Bix, being in Richmond, Indiana, just walking through Star Piano Building and knowing where the ground sat. We didn't get to the museum, but I looked at your slideshow again of the pictures of the horn. To think about this old church being converted, Jelly Roll's playing it. First of all, I find it humorous that Jelly Roll, the
in church.
diamond tip tooth pimp carrying 6 shooters, is walking into a old church to record. But he was a savory character for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Going back to it though, what I started to realize is the history of, yes, he's in Chicago. Yes, he's recorded with artists, but where's he from? And this goes back to New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And because of his Creole descent, because of his stylistic version or what he hears in his head from music, he's coming from a place, and he did write the song, I Thought I Heard Buddy Bolden Say. He's coming from a place of very rich history in the New Orleans area. And he says in one of the Library of Congress things, and in some of his songs, some of his interviews in his early years, I brought the Spanish twinge to the ragtime music. And in a lot of his music, you can hear that Spanish twinge.
Absolutely.
So you've got French, you've got Spanish, you've got this American ragtime, and you've got European music, which takes us back to Tony Jackson, his influence. Tony Jackson was part of the cakewalk and part of the minstrel music, which Wynton said it, and I've gotten stuck on it. The cakewalk was the freed slaves for the first time making fun of the rich white people who saw their shows and decided that the minstrel shows would be a good way to mock what the cakewalk was, and the minstrel shows have grown. And so over time, where did the music come from? And it was, the history beyond this is so rich. And then you got to visit New Orleans and go see Louis Armstrong Park. So from Buddy Bolden, then you get Louis Armstrong, not from, but at the same time, this rich history of the 20s and 30s is beginning from this New Orleans music. So I had to step back into the 20s and think about this Cajun style, this Creole style, this blend of Spanish twinge, this blend of jazz, this new American and blues, because the Delta Blues.
Delta Blues, right.
Same region. You've
Right.
got somebody who did come up in church, Jelly Roll. He's got the respect and the honor for that gospel and religious music. He's picked up a lot of the blues along the way. So I started to hear the album different this time because of all of that. And it blew me away just to think that we dig into the 40s, 50s, and 60s, that straight jazz music that Wynton refers to, Miles and Herbie and Wayne, these early settler, Lee Morgan, Freddie Hubbard. You start listening to this and you think, man, that was jazz. But 2 decades before, that was where it began. And so to me, if Jeanette is the cradle of recorded jazz, then New Orleans is the birthing place of it.
Absolutely.
And to me, now going back, I wouldn't rate it super, super high, but it definitely shaped my jazz. And it really blew me. It shook my world this week to listen to it again. It really did, because the historical facts. And I've got a lot more historical facts just because I was blown away. But one of the things I want to read, Jelly showed us how to draw from our influences around us and to create original works. We can be open to new ideas with flexibility and freedom to experiment and explore. And I don't have who that's from.
That's all right. It's a great quote.
And
The-
on next
free-
is,
The freedom to experiment and explore back in the 20s was probably a huge thing for these musicians who are tired of the stuffy classical music that they were probably taught or made to learn, and now they're free to move on and explore a different kind of music. And Jelly Roll gave them that opportunity.
yep.
So you said it shook your world. Let me ask you this. Would you recommend it to a first-time listener?
I have to. I said this last week, and I said it last week. I would, because you have to understand where all of it began. Without listening to it, you don't have to appreciate it, but understanding where the history of jazz music began, and it really did begin long before Jelly Roll. It did. So you have to listen to it. Is it approachable? No, it's really not, because it's not quite jazz. But so much of the stuff that I love as jazz music today, and listening to Wynton Marsalis, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You start hearing that New Orleans style, Trombone Shorty, and seeing him last year with the New Breed Brass Band,
Mhm.
that is Jelly Roll with current technology. To
Yeah.
watch the tuba player and the trombone and the trumpet and the percussionist just going. The percussionist had a bass drum strapped to his belly like a marching, and had his cymbal on the top of the New Breed brass band. That's it. So yeah, I would recommend it.
Yeah. I would probably not recommend it to a first time jazz listener just because I would be afraid of their reaction. And why did you make me listen to that? I'm glad that we did it on our journey for sure. And I'm glad that we took a year to come back to it and really appreciate it a little more because not that you not that you need the processing time, but maybe the first time through uh again, all of those crusty, dusty old thoughts in your head of the old time movies and Prohibition and our gang just go through your head, and that's all you can think of. So I'm glad I had another time to process it.
Yeah.
I'm ready to rate the album. I'll tell you my score first, or unless you want to go first.
Nope.
Okay. So for Jelly Roll Morton, the classic Chicago Red Hot Peppers, not Chili Peppers. I rated a 6.5.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And that's a good solid score. I actually went lower. And
Yes, you
this
did.
first week listening to it a year ago, I gave it a 5.5.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that. It's just maybe not going to be high on your radar to come back to
Yes, correct.
in the future. Yep.
But what you don't know, you don't know. And I just out of curiosity, with the few minutes remaining, what would you have given it today?
I'd have gone 1.5 higher. I'd have gone all the way to 8, believe it or not. I would have just because of all of the stuff that you and I have discussed over the last year and all of the music that we've listened to. I do now have a greater appreciation. It won't be something that gets in my ears regularly like next week's artist is, but but when it comes on, well, okay, it's recognizable to me. So I know who it is. The artistry in it is amazing. The recording is better than Bix's, so my score had to reflect that. So
well, and that all goes back to craftsmanship, awareness, creativity, spirit, drive, and emotion. But I use that term approachable. Yeah,
approachable.
It's tough to think that this is it, but I appreciated the beginning of it.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I noted here, this was on the last page of my notes from that week, and I want to say this, and then I'm going to introduce or let you introduce next week's album. Jazz, and wow, this was written November 14th. So what, 8 months ago, 9 months ago now.
Yep.
Jazz is reshaping our lives. And it really has. This one was a history lesson for me this week, and going back to that. Next week's album is going to be another incredible history lesson. You ready?
Next week's album. Oh my gosh, you guys. Let me introduce the artist and I'll tell you the name of the album. Next week's album is Oliver Nelson. The Blues and the Abstract Truth is the name of the album. It was released on the Impulse label on LP and CD. It was recorded the 23rd of February, 1961. Now, the weeks that we did this a year ago, I just love the weeks where we turn the page and we say, never heard of this cat. And Jelly Roll was kind of the same way because I don't think we had started reading the Jeanette book just yet. But you turn the page and we both say, never heard of Oliver Nelson. Who is he and what's he all about? And then he hits you like a train.
Yep.
You said it in Winton's episode that album ruined you. This one ruined me. This one, everything else has to live up to the Blues and the Abstract Truth. And we'll talk about it in depth next week. I hope you guys all join us.
Yep.
Any final notes about Jelly Roll?
I really don't. If it is going to be first time, go out and dig into the first time.
Okay.
If you haven't listened to it, it's essential. These are 100 albums that are obscure. They're bizarre. Some of the music you may not have love with. We may not either. But the reality is, it's essential to me to understand that history and the rich history.
Yeah.
if nothing else, listen to it once and be done. Never go back to it. Any thoughts from you?
You know what? Not really. I was glad that I got to play it in the van yesterday for the fam and got to hear their take on the music. But I'm just so looking forward to next week and Oliver Nelson. You
Yeah.
turn I said, you turn the page and we both look at each other and think, okay, who's this cat? What's he all about? Put it on, get it in your ears so that you know who we're talking
You're gonna
about
start
next
crying
week.
now, aren't
I
you?
am going to start crying now because it ruined me. This is candy for me, and I have to purposely not come back to it over and over and over again and put other stuff in my ears because this is comfort music to me. So put up the slide, The Blues and the Abstract Truth, recorded 1961.
And the first slide I actually have up here is Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, Eric Dolphy, Oliver Nelson, George Barrow on Barry sax, Bill Evans piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and Roy Haynes on drum. And then I'll transition because what we don't know. Who are those names? No idea today. I do know Freddie Hubbard's name.
Sure.
But Oliver Nelson, Blues and the Abstract Truth on Impulse. You're seeing right now the cover art. There is a couple of different pictures out there with that on there. And make sure not to drop in more Blues and the Abstract Truth.
Why? Why not?
Although not a bad album. Yeah, this album is the Blues and the Abstract Truth.
Hey, but if you like it, put on the more Blues and the Abstract Truth because it goes
just go
on.
ahead and explain.
Yeah,
you're gonna like them both.
You're gonna like them both. Absolutely. Hey, thank you so much for joining us, you guys. It's been a great episode to record. Let us know what you think. If you like Jelly Roll, if you didn't like Jelly Roll, yeah, for sure. You can find us if you want to email us. Our email address is theunconnoisseur@gmail.com. Of course, the website, theunconnoisseur.com, where we do have a merch store. So, and Christmas is coming up just a few months. So you might want to order a mug or a shirt for a family member or a loved one who likes jazz. Where else can they find us? Oh, you can find me on TikTok. I'm at The Unconnoisseur. Yep.
And I don't think either of us have been on TikTok or the YouTube Shorts very much. So on my end, I'm not doing so well. I will start to change that up as we go. The other is that we are on podcasts, your favorite podcasts out there. Don't forget to tune in on the podcast. If you're already on the podcast, thanks for joining us silently. Sorry you get to miss our beautiful faces week after week. So check us out on YouTube anyways.
That's right. Have a great week, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.